strategist, market watchers, Rebecca Walser, and John Layfield as well. John, why don't we start with you? I was trying to kind of hash as much as I could out with Blake after the weekend before I got to you guys, but we were up 441 initially on the Dow. Now we're up about 200. But what do you make of the reaction to what was either hashed out or not hashed out in Buenos Aires this weekend?
Yeah, Connell, I think the reaction was to be expected. Very negative expectations went into this meeting, and so anything positive that came out of this, I think, was going to have the market be up, and this was something that was positive. At least it wasn't just we're going to put 25% tariffs on everything. I think the Chinese right here are killing the clock. They lack specifics. When you talk about car tariffs coming off in China, GM already produces more cars in China than they produce in the United States. They're not subject to tariffs anyway. China, if they can get 25% waived on those soybeans, they'd rather buy it from us than Brazil anyway. I think China right here is hoping that in 90 days they're in a better position, because I think China has overestimated their hand with us, just as we have overestimated with them, that our economy is faltering and we're politically divided.
Right. Both could use a little bit of help. You're probably right on the growth side, which, Heidi, would be your department. So, the president moves into an area, President Trump, where, if growth is slowing down in the United States, if you can take this trade concern not off the table, but at least put it on the back burner for a little while, in this case 90 days, maybe there's another extension after that, at least you're not hurting growth any further, right, by going from 10 to 25% on those tariffs. What's your impression of what happened?
Connell, you're exactly right. You're not hurting growth any further, but I think it's important to remember that those tariffs are still in place. In addition to the 25% tariffs, we still have on steel and 10% on aluminum. So I think at the margin, there's no more negative impact that we can see. But don't forget, it has yet to trickle through into the data. These tariffs were largely just implemented in September. So I think the jury's still out in terms of how much it's going to impact growth, particularly in Q4 and heading into 2019.
Yeah, have you done any work, Heidi, real quick, we'll get Rebecca in a second, but have you done any work on that? Because I've seen some research to suggest that if we went from, say, the 10 to 25, then you're overriding the good news that came out or was already baked in the cake, so to speak, because of the tax cut or any other fiscal stimulus, anything you might add up in that department. Whereas if you stay at the 10%, economic growth won't be hampered as much. I mean, some of that seems obvious, but have you done work in terms of, figuring out the math on that?
Well, I think it's important to keep in mind that any of the impacts that we've seen from last year's tax cut, by and large, the marginal benefits are going to be rolling off just because this was something that was implemented at this point last year. So I think the impact of the 10% still remains to be seen, but clearly it's going to eat into some of the good news that we saw last year.
Right. Rebecca, let me go to you on this. As Blake said, Larry Kudlow was speaking to some reporters after he finished up with Stewart in the White House driveway. Another headline that is coming out of that now is that he says that China, in terms of rolling back the auto tariffs, Kudlow assumes that means that they will roll them back all the way. We'll see on that. I don't think any of that has been confirmed, but you got this 40% tariff on cars coming out of the U.S. and going into China. So a company like Tesla, for example, which one of the companies that does actually make cars here still, they're building a plant in China but haven't completed it yet. They were getting hammered on that. That would be good news for them and to some extent for Ford. But Rebecca, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that is huge, and obviously we're seeing the impact on Tesla stock up today as well. But, Connell, the thing is that we have to give President Trump some credit here. We have had 40 years of really non-active trade situation with China, and this is the art of the deal really coming to fruition. I mean, I see President Trump upsetting the apple cart. I think China didn't really take him seriously in the beginning. They didn't think that they really would have to negotiate with him. I think they were waiting for the midterms too to see what really do they have to do with this president. And now we're seeing that they realize, listen, neither one of them, neither China nor the U.S. are hurting enough right now to really come to the negotiating table and make a deal. But a 90-day pause is basically going to allow us to negotiate something, and I can't wait to see what it's going to be. It's got to be something better than what we've had.
Because that puts us in, John, to 2019, and brings up the point you made earlier, where you still believe the Chinese are trying to, I believe the term you used was run out the clock, right? So which clock? The first term of President Trump? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, I believe so. Look, China right now is not feeling the effects of these tariffs. I think we're feeling this a little bit more. You look at soybeans right now sitting on barges in the Ohio River that can't be sold, that are sitting there rotting. In China right now, some of this is front-loading, so they will start feeling this in the first part of the next year.
Their economy's slow, right? The growth is not what it was, so...
Yeah, but it's not a one-for-one correlation, Connell.
Okay.
The economy is slowing because of structural problems within their economy. Their GDP was actually up July through October, and exports were up July through October. Now, some of that is front-loading, but they're not going to feel the effects yet of these tariffs. So I think China feels like they're holding a winning hand here.
They hope they can get a president that's more favorable to them. They might not, by the way, Heidi. Obviously, number one, President Trump could win again. He could be reelected, and number two, whoever beats him, if he were to lose, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a friendlier president to China. But I wonder, do you agree with John that that's their strategy at this point? Just drag this thing out as long as possible?
Yes, but I wonder what's going to happen at the end of 90 days. I mean, I think expectations already are set that we'll see some type of resolution. I don't know how likely that is, given that talks have been going on for more than a year at this point, and really we haven't gotten very far. And there remain some very substantive issues, I think, that need to be worked out over the next 90 days. So I'm not sure how much progress we'll see, and I think perhaps that's one of the reasons we're starting to see the rally fade a little bit today.
Solving things like intellectual property theft, we've taken years and haven't made much progress. So doing it in 90 days seems unlikely, but maybe you build towards another extension. Thanks to all three of you, Heidi, Rebecca, and John. We appreciate it as always.